Hey guys, today we're here at the Hollywood Mechanic and we're working on a McLaren 570S. This is a 2016. There's an extremely common problem where you press the start button and then nothing happens, and you keep pushing it and nothing happens, and then you smell like a burning smell and you may see smoke coming from the engine bay. And what's happening is, let me show you what we got here. This is the original, factory original flywheel that came on the car. Now, you know how a flywheel lessens the vibrations from shifts and pistons firing by using some dampening. Most cars use some kind of rubber, and that's where you get the dual mass flywheel from. It's two masses that are separated by something springy, like either springs or rubber, that dampen that. Now this one, the springs here, they start to fail. They've updated this flywheel. The new flywheel is, show you here, like this. So the springs are still there. They're just encased in here so that when they fail, it doesn't fly out and get jammed up. Those little pieces fly out and then jam up in the teeth of the flywheel, which then prohibits the starter from spinning. Then you have to buy a starter, which I think at Beverly Hills McLaren was $2,200. But I mean, and then here you can see some of the pieces of spring. And the first time that the car was brought to me, I was not aware of this issue. It's not online on forums, but I did spin the motor by hand at the front. I even put it in the invoice that, you know, I spun the motor here by hand. Everything spun smoothly. I could see where a ton of oil from this seal had been pouring down onto where the starter sits, which is right here. And I said, you know, it must just be baked from, you know, this thing has had a lot of problems. So I replaced the starter, and no metal could be seen in this little window here. But then, you know, he left and was driving it, and then boom, started having more and more issues trying to start it. Occasionally it wouldn't start, and then finally it damaged the second second starter. Now, you don't have to buy a new starter. I actually have a company named CP Generators that will rebuild it for you, and they replace everything. You can see new gear there, new bearings, new wire. Even this rubber boot there is new. CP Generator Inc., that's their number there, 909-463-0606. They'll rebuild it for $500. I actually have an extra one if anyone needs it that I will sell you for $500. But they even replaced the windings internally. He said everything except for the case has been replaced and comes with a warranty for, you know, again, a quarter of the price, less than a quarter of what you're going to get it from McLaren. Now, this will be a recall, I'm sure. Obviously, there's a design difference here. So if you get it done, keep your invoice. Things that you're going to need to replace with this is right here. There is an O-ring where the coolant comes in. There's an O-ring here for this one where the coolant comes in. This one has actually melted. So I didn't remove that, but you might want to get a new O-ring for this secondary air valve, depending on the age of the car. Then over here you have the gear oil coolers with two O-rings. I went ahead and did the rear main seal on the back of this. We did both axle seals, but also there's a big O-ring here that we replaced, as well as a very small O-ring right there. Gear oil goes in here, which is stored in the back. The clutch oil is up front and is cooled here. Okay, we went ahead and got the 4 seals around the clutch cooler. We went ahead and got the clutch housing gasket, also the transmission input shaft seal. We got all 4 of the gear oil cooler seals And that's really all we're gonna do. You could get, these are easily accessible. We are, excuse me, no, I take that back. We also did the gear oil filter while the transmission is out. This is a great time to do that because when it's in, you have to kind of kink it to get it to come in and out. Get the O-ring for that. I believe that one comes on it. Then there's, this is for the DCT fluid filter, and that one, the gear, the O-ring does not come with it, so replace that as well. And so as you can see, here's that cover. All the bolts for this cover are exactly the same, so you know, you can take them out, don't worry about losing them. There's this O-ring here which we still have to replace right there. And then yeah, Motul high torque DCTF 375W90 in the back. And then as far as like removing it, as you can see, I've removed the entire suspension on each side. Make sure you know, label your shims here. I've labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then wrapped up the shims that go in behind them so we can maintain our camber and caster. There were no shims on the bottom of this one. Depress the brake pedal and hold it so that, you know, no more fluid comes out. As you can see, I've got a cap on there, cap your brake lines. All this comes out pretty easily. You'll need probably a second pair of hands. This is extremely heavy. Make sure your gloves are clean when interacting with that rotor. And then also make sure you put something in the front to support the front of the car. I don't know how easily this thing would balance on a lift if you take off the complete rear suspension, rear transmission, rear bumper, and everything. So just be safe, have a stand there. And then I used a second stand here with a little soft puck to help with the engine angle. Other than that, you got a ton of little plugs to unplug everywhere. You'll probably have oil and coolant here from where, you know, people spill it, filling the oil or changing the oil filter up above. This is pretty interesting. This screws out to help jam it here in the middle. So you'll use a 30mm wrench to kind of back it off and make it loose. The way that you remove the bolt through the middle is through this tube here. That is a 21mm, and you're gonna need to do one hand on this side of the car and one hand on this side of the car, and just, you know, as this hand's going this way, this hand's going that way. You can do it by yourself, and then you'll need a magnet to slide it out of that tube there. This is what it looks like right here. Obviously someone put blue Loctite on that. These are the bolts that hold the transmission and engine together. Now some of these bolts, it's going to be confusing because that plate for the clutch is pretty thick. So some of those bolts don't need to be removed to take it out, and I would not remove them until you have it out. The other bolts, you can see like there's a nut there on that shaft. There are a couple of bolts right there. You're going to just be careful. The bolt right where your crank sensor is actually to the clutch cover, so don't need to remove it. So you don't need to remove the crank sensor either. Then below you're gonna have 3 long bolts underneath there that look like this. Give this guy a call right back. Let's see. These are extremely difficult to get to. What I use is a dog bone with this like breaker bar here. This thing is able to very thinly fit into tight areas, and then you just basically use you know, your typical dog bone tool right here to get in there to loosen. Because I mean, when you're right in here with these tubes and stuff, you're really tight up against stuff, you know, especially like right here, the transmission is right up against it, you know. Those bolts are like literally right here, so very difficult, but you can do it. Obviously We've removed the whole bumper. I mean, I'm not going to go through a step by step. This would be an immense process, but you can definitely do it. Just a tip on removing this back piece here. I just use a little hook and release each one of these tabs, you know. You don't need to loosen this. Just hook up and release it, and then, you know, you'll continue releasing it all the way around to get that center piece out. Really not that bad. Really not that bad of a job. Let's see. Yeah, and then, you know, this is all tied up. The battery's disconnected, but the reason this is tied up is because we had to push it outside for a while, and so the battery needed to be reconnected for a little bit. But yeah, that's basically it. You know, be careful, don't break anything. Be very careful with your plugs. Squeeze, push them in first, then squeeze them, then pull them out. These are all gonna break. I mean, it's fucking plastic everywhere. This came out pretty easy, you know, with this little like claw that you tighten and it just pops that out. But I wouldn't mess with this alignment or this boot. While you're in here, possibly do your air filters. Check for coolant hoses that might be leaking. If you have any evap purge or evap leaks, good time to look at. You do have to drain the coolant, so go ahead and do a coolant flush. Yeah. Change your clutch fluid, change your gear oil. Go ahead and change the engine oil. I lost a lot of engine oil here changing that rear main seal. So anyway, this should be pretty good advice for anyone that wants to do it. And if you need more clarification than I've just given you, you probably shouldn't be doing it.